Folks, today's video is going to be another edition of my Makeup Archives videos, and today we are going to be deep diving into 2016. And if you've ever seen one of these videos before, I've done several of them at this point. Basically, I just go back into the archives, I look at Google listings. Musings of a Muse Temptalia is like my main resource. Pop Sugar is another one. Various blogs going over archives and just looking at makeup that came out in a specific year and kind of putting them in the context of like, would people buy it now? Would people be interested in it now? What does that release look like in today's context? And I swear I've said the last two versions of these, the 2014 and 2015, I was like, oh, this is when the makeup community... No. 2016 is where it all started happening. Truly. Like, looking at the listing, I was like, this came out that year, and then this came out that year, and then this came out that year? Holy crap. So, this is 5 years ago. We're at 5 years ago. 5 years in the past. And before I go any further, if you do like this video at some point during the video, please give it a thumbs up. And comment below what things you might remember, or if you tried any of these things in your favorites from that year. So, please engage in the comments. Thanks. All right. So we're gonna be looking at mostly high-end stuff, but I do have some drugstore products. So let's just start with the drugstore products. L'Oreal Paris came out with the True Match Lumi Cushion Foundation. And this was not like the first cushion foundation that came out in the US, but this I think was like the first time a drugstore, like a US drugstore brand, really kind of jumped on that like specific K-beauty trend, which was the cushion foundation. I don't remember how many shades of this they had, but I do remember that L'Oreal had a decent shade range for the drugstore. I never tried any cushion foundations. I haven't bought L'Oreal products in like a really long time, but I do remember after this, there were like a lot of other brands that started doing the cushion thing. So, I mean, that definitely started, it reinvigorated a trend here in the US that had already been big in Korea. I mean, I'd be down to try a cushion foundation. I should look and see what kinds of stuff. I should look on YesStyle and see what kinds of cushion foundations they might have. Anyway, next, more drugstore products. This was during the heyday of the liquid lip craze. Like, this was after the Kylie lip kits came out. This was after ColourPop started doing, I think, their ultra matte lips, which were horrific formulas, by the way. NYX came out with their lip lingerie, and I never bought one of these, but I do remember when people first started buying them, they're like,
oh, this lasts forever on your lips. That's great.
But then shortly thereafter, people were like, this is the most uncomfortable liquid lipstick I have ever used in my life. And I feel like there's just like a collective cognitive dissonance during that period where people were like, oh, this liquid lipstick is gonna last forever on my lips. This is exactly what I want. When in reality, they all looked like
buttholes.
Like, our lips just looked like assholes the entire time. Like, I feel like nobody's lips ever looked really, really good with super dry liquid lipsticks unless they were like really dark because it hid all the cracks, or if you had lip fillers and you didn't have cracks in your lips. So this was, I think, one of the biggest culprits of that, because this looked terrible. The lip lingerie looked bad. I hated them. The Bitter Lace Beauty Prism Highlighter. Do you guys remember how freaking popular rainbow highlighters were? Rainbow highlighters were a thing, came out in 2016. Bitter Lace Beauty was like the first brand that really hit it big with the rainbow highlighter. And then after that point, every brand, like Wet n Wild did one. I feel like Milani probably did one. Too Faced did one. So many brands came out with rainbow highlighters or some variation of a rainbow highlighter that Bitter Lace Beauty caused a real stir in the makeup community and in the makeup industry. Like, rainbow highlighters, what? But again, I think those were one of those things where like in photos it looked kind of cool, but in real life you're like, why do I got stripes of like all of the colors on my face? Like, I don't feel like it looked as good as we were thinking it did, but it was pretty in the pan, but on the face it didn't look like it did in the pan. I never bought this. I bought some other Bitter Lace Beauty highlighters, but they were not very highlighty. They were much more like blush toppers or like eyeshadows. Yeah, this niche Etsy brand struck gold with its handmade rainbow highlighter. And then everybody started coming out with rainbow highlighters. So is Bitter Lace Beauty, they're still a thing. They're still a thing, right? I just remember it was like out of stock for months and people were like, oh my God, I need this rainbow highlighter. And that's why all the other brands decided to make them. Glossier hit it big in 2016. I think they might've come out in 2015, but in 2016, they had the stretch concealer and the Halo Scope. That's what it was, the Halo Scope. The like cream highlighter things, the stick cream highlighters, and then the stretch concealer that came in the pot. This was when Glossier was like really getting on the map. Glossier was starting to like gain some notoriety and people were starting to talk about it. Like this was early days of Glossier, back when they only had like 4 products. I was always interested in trying that concealer, but I never did. Speaking of highlighters, ABH came out with the glow kits in 2016. The Moonchild glow kit, as well as the like sugar glow kit, the ones that were more neutral. I still have my Moonchild glow kit. I never bought any of the other ones, but I still have it. It's probably it's expired at this point. The Moonchild glow kit, whether or not that was in direct response to the rainbow highlight craze because of Bitter Lace Beauty, I don't know. But that was the year. That was the year that, like, again, Anastasia was really getting put on the map. This was Anastasia's year. I think before this point, they were really only known for brow stuff, but there's several more products in here that we're going to talk about from ABH from 2016. It's kind of funny, actually.
Next.
Urban Decay released their Vice lipstick line. They re-released the Vice lipsticks completely. They had a new formula. There were like 100 shades, and I think I still have one somewhere. But I do remember this formula was great. Like, the Vice lipsticks were pretty good formulas, not gonna lie. They had 100 shades. They really like came out swinging with these lipsticks, and they're like, we're gonna give you so many colors to choose from that you won't even know what you want to pick. Like, it was kind of a double-edged sword, because on one hand you're like, oh cool, so many colors, but then on the other hand I'm like, oh my god, so many colors. Like, I liked these lipsticks. I definitely did. I had one that was like a purple, kind of frosty, and then 1993 was the other one, like a nude brown. I liked these lipsticks. They did also release the Naked Ultimate Basics palette. And this one I remember, I didn't buy, but it was very resemblant of the Stila in the No palette that I was obsessed with. It was my favorite neutral palette, like, of all time. Since been discontinued. I'm very sad about it. But the Naked Ultimate Basics was just all mattes, and it was like they took the Naked Basics, the little ones, took out all the shimmers, and then they just made an Ultimate Basics. It was funny because they had the Naked palettes, they streamlined it to the Naked Basics, and then they're like, we need to make it bigger again, so they called it the Ultimate Basics. I feel like that would be a term for like a clique in high school.
We're the Ultimate Basics.
It was all matte nudes, so that was, again, them just not quite beating a dead horse, but like the horse was injured at that point. The horse wasn't doing so well. Back to Anastasia. The Makeup by Mario. The Master Palette by Mario came out in 2016. I never owned this, but I remember a lot of people just obsessing over it and coveting it when it first came out, and then because it was limited edition. This is one of those palettes where I'm like, I kind of wish I had it. I kind of wish I had got it at the time, because looking at the photos of it now, it does look very pretty. Like, it looks very like romantic, very like sultry, but not. This looks like a pretty palette. I don't necessarily like pay attention to celebrity makeup artists, so I didn't really know who Mario was, which is probably why I wasn't that interested in it at the time, because A, I don't really give a shit about the Kardashians, so I had no idea who he was, and at this point I wasn't, I had only kind of just gotten into ABH stuff. I might have bought like a brow pomade and then the glow kit at this point. But the Makeup by Mario, that palette was pretty. It's pretty. Here was a palette that I've talked about in a couple of videos before, talking about bad collabs. Only bad because of the brand. Too Faced and Nikkie Tutorials released the Power of Makeup palette. And if you want to hear me talk about why it's bad, I'll have a link to a video up here, because Too Faced really did Nikkie dirty. Really did Nikkie dirty as far as like just setting her up for failure, didn't pay her enough, and released a lackluster palette that the fans did not like. Like, it was a horrible release, because Nikkie's palette that she got in the mail, like her official one, had a great formula, but then the palette that was released to the masses, to the consumer base, was not the same quality. So this was a roller coaster of a year for Too Faced, for sure, because we will get into another one that was like a highly successful Too Faced release, which was the, if I can find it, the Sweet Peach eyeshadow palette. Sweet Peach and the Power of Makeup came out the same year. How is that possible? This I never bought, but I'm looking at it now, I'm like, oh, this is cute. Like, this is cute. I've never owned any Too Faced eyeshadow palettes, so I don't necessarily know. I don't know how the quality holds up. I really don't. But looking at it, this is pretty. It smelled like peach. They had already had their chocolate stuff, so they're like, let's have it smell like a fruit now. This was a pretty palette. I do remember at the time, though, when they released it, and I was like,
There's only like 2 peaches in here. Like, what? This isn't enough peach.
we need a bright peach and a dark peach. There was just a lot of neutrals. And like a purple and a green. It's pretty, but is it a peach palette? Debatable. Kat Von D, when it was still Kat Von D, released a palette that I bought. Why I bought it, I don't know. This was the Serpentina eyeshadow palette, and this was an entire palette of like satin shimmer jewel tones and then like a random like loose gold pigment. It was so bulky. It was such a bulky palette that I bought, that I like tricked myself into thinking that I loved it because I was like, oh, these colors are so pretty, but there was like no cohesive color story you could put together with it. The only look I ever did with it on my channel was like an oil slick because it's just like all the colors that are shimmery. But this palette was bad. The formula wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it was just like the entire concept was bad because it was really bulky and there wasn't like a cohesive color story. There were no mattes, but it was too big for it to be like a companion palette. It was just all around a mess of a palette. Why I bought it, I don't know. I think I eventually decluttered it and gave it to somebody else because I was like, you can get some use out of it. I'm not. It was pretty, but it was bad. Okay, and on to some MAC. Ariana Grande. Was this RE2? I think this might have been RE1. It was Viva Glam Ariana 1 with MAC. And it was like a kind of purpley based pink. It looked like a lighter version of Rebel, kind of like the fuchsia purple pink color, but lighter. Was there also a gloss? Yes, there was a gloss that went along with it. This was a big year for Ariana too. MAC made some choices in this year that I will get to in a minute, but this was one of the good choices they made. This was one of the good releases that they had. They did a Viva Glam with Ariana Grande. Like, at this point, MAC doing a Viva Glam collab with a pop star is just kind of a given, and this was a good choice for them that year. It was good. Now, the bad of the year was MAC's summer collection from 2016, or one of their summer collections, and it was like a festival-themed, like Coachella, Burning Man type collection, but it was called Vibe Tribe. Why though, MAC? This was, reading it was so cringy. Just reading the descriptions and the titles of these things. Oh, it made me cringe. It was painful because I can just imagine the people in the boardroom coming up with this like,
Oh my god, Vibe Tribe, just like a Coachella.
no, like don't call it that. Like you could have just called it like festival. There's so many words that could have gone with festival or music or like desert things. Just Vibe Tribe.
Well,
And like the imagery was again very like, I mean, it has the same kind of culturally appropriative vibes of people who wear headdresses to music festivals. Another thing that was bad in a different way, just from my own perspective, Urban Decay did the Alice Through the Looking Glass collection. I hate Urban Decay's Disney collabs. Is this Disney? Was it Disney? I don't know. I don't like Urban Decay's like IP collabs. I've never liked Urban Decay's IP collabs. I haven't mind their like collaborations with influencers or with individual people, but the ones they do with either Disney things or like Tim Burton things or just fairy tales in Game of Thrones, all of them have not been great in my own personal opinion. It's my own opinion, so if you like this, then fine. And it's like a disjointed color story too, like just all around confusing.
next.
Before we get into the very last product, Tarte Shape Tape, the concealer, not the foundation debacle. The foundation debacle I think was like 2018, but the concealer, that thing was everywhere. Before then, I don't remember what the most. I think before then the NARS Creamy Radiant Concealer was like the most popular one among like beauty gurus. The high-end one, like Maybelline Fit Me, was another super popular one from the drugstore. But when Tarte Shape Tape came out, that marketing was so, just the name Shape Tape, it sounded snappy. It gave you the idea where it's like, oh, you can shape your face, you know, you can use it to kind of shape and shade your face. And it was so full coverage. And this was also the time when everybody was into very full coverage foundation and base products. So people were obsessed with it. Like I owned it. I bought it twice. I remember I had bought like some NYX ones. I'd had like a Makeup Forever concealer at one point. But when Shape Tape came out, I was like, oh, I don't have to use a lot of this because it's super full coverage. And I remember it lasted me forever because there was so much product in that little bottle. It lasted me like 3 times as long as my NARS concealer that I had loved at that point. But Shape Tape, this was Tarte's big moment for a while before shit went south and they decided to, like Urban Decay, beat the dead horse of the naked palettes. Tarte beat the dead horse of Shape Tape anything. Whether it was like powder, foundation, other concealers, just like they named everything Shape Tape, where it's like it lost its luster so quickly. But at the time, that shit was everywhere. Like, oh my God, people were obsessed with that concealer. And you know, at the time, I loved it too, but in hindsight, if I tried to use it now, my eyes would probably look crinkly as hell. But at the time, I had younger skin. It was 5 years ago, so like I was 27. I didn't have all the lines I have now. It was very popular. It was so popular. Concealer shades were out of stock. Like, my concealer shade was out of stock for a while. And I remember when I finally could get a second one, like, I wasn't even out of the first one, but I saw that it was in stock and I was like, fuck, I'm buying it because I don't want it to go out of stock again. That concealer was the beginning of some good and some bad. Good in that, no, I mean, it was actually probably the beginning of a lot of bad. Every brand wanted to put out this like super fucking full coverage concealer, and you know, concealers got more full coverage during that period because people were loving the like full coverage base, primer, concealer, baking, everything. I'm glad we're out of that period, to be honest. I'm glad we're past the period where baking was regular for everyone because it looks in person real crusty. And this concealer didn't help with that. But at the time, people were obsessed with it. Now, last but not least, 2016. Modern Renaissance. Modern Renaissance started a modern renaissance of warm toned eyeshadows. Modern Renaissance from ABH was the first time that I remember this red pinky toned eyeshadow palette really getting on the market. That wasn't, I think Lime Crime had one before this, but like a mainstream brand inside Sephora that was getting a lot of buzz on the internet came out swinging with this palette. Like the Makeup by Mario one was the same year, but Modern Renaissance left that one in the dust. I swear to God. Like the fact that the Makeup by Mario palette came out the same year and I didn't even realize they came out the same year shows the power of this Modern Renaissance palette. I still have that palette. I love that palette. I don't think I will ever get rid of that palette. Not because it's like the best palette I've ever owned. It's very good, don't get me wrong. Like I still love that palette and I still use it, but I keep it because it was a gift. It was like the first, did he get it for me for, yeah, Josh got it for me for Christmas the first year we were dating. So it has a special place in my heart because it was the first Christmas gift I ever got for my boyfriend. So I still have it. But Modern Renaissance, after that, you had Violet Voss, you had Huda Beauty, you had Too Faced, Tarte, so many brands coming out with warm toned eyeshadow palettes, but none of them quite got it exactly right the same way that Modern Renaissance did. I have done a video redesigning some palettes and I did make a couple of tweaks to Modern Renaissance based on what I would like probably do now. But at the time, that palette, that was like the only palette I was using for a while. Like Buon Fresco was a great all over the lid color. I used a lot of pink, a lot of red. I mean, I was living out my best Gerard Way eyeshadow dreams, and it was iconic. It was an iconic eyeshadow palette. And regardless of how I feel about ABH now and how I feel about if I want to buy any of their products in the future, that palette is iconic. It, I feel like, was the real turning point between neutrals being like the staple for eyeshadow palettes to people really venturing into the idea of warm neutrals, because I feel like before that, red eyeshadow and pink eyeshadow weren't that popular. People had a hard time working with them and they made you look sick, or people weren't really as comfortable with using those warmer toned eyeshadows. And Modern Renaissance was like, Modern Renaissance had that moment and they held on to it for a long time. Because after that, the next year when Subculture came out, it was the bust. But we'll get into that for 2017 because Modern Renaissance came out the end of 2016. It was like holiday 2016, which was the best time to release it, honestly. If it came out now for the first time, would people still be so enamored with it? Probably not, because there would have been like so many other palettes at this point that looked similar. But at the time, she was it. Yeah, that's everything I wanted to talk about in today's makeup archives. This wasn't a super long one just because I feel like the big staples and the big moments of this year were enough to talk about them just at length rather than going through like a shit ton of MAC releases, because so many of them I didn't even remember. Like, I don't even remember them. I have nothing to say about them because at this point MAC releases and MAC collections were not that great and not that popular. Like, people had stopped caring as much about MAC collections because so many other brands were coming up at that point. Like, MAC did not have its like strong hold on the like limited edition collection thing the way it had like 2 years prior. Today's song of the day is another one from the Jujutsu Kaisen soundtrack. This one is it's called Remember, and it's by the composer that made the soundtrack, but also featuring the lead singer from this band Coldrain. And it's the song that they feature during like the final fight scene, and it is so good. Like, it's so good. I mean, I talked about how much I love the soundtrack in my last video, but this song specifically is just a banger. Like, just turn it on, just turn it up super loud, and like the way that the fight is cut together with the song is just chef's kiss. So yeah, that song is your song of the day because I'm listening to it nonstop today. So are you surprised? No. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up. That would be much appreciated. And if you remember any other things from this particular year I'm talking about that I didn't talk about, please let me know in the comments. I know I didn't talk about everything. And if you remember any of these specifically that you maybe still have or you used and you liked or you didn't like, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you want to follow me on any of my other social medias, my Facebook, or if you want to follow me on any of my other social medias, my Instagram, my Twitter, and my Twitch, all of them will be linked down below, as well as my P.O. box. Anything else I forgot? I don't think so. So thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you are having a good week. I hope you are safe and healthy and happy and taking care of yourself. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye.